This has got to be one of the trickiest animations I've ever tried to perform, and I'm going to be trying to create the entire thing live from scratch so you can see all the issues I run into, how I fix them, and overall my thought process for creating this advanced animation. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. And today I'm going to show you how I can create this really cool, prettier animation. And the main animation we're going to be focusing on is load animation. When the page loads, it looks like this, and then everything moves nicely into place. Now I've done a little bit of work beforehand just to break out the color. So we have that red, yellow, blue, and purple color that you see over here, as well as the background color behind the animation and the gray color for these grayer lines that you see here. Also, I've gone one single step further and I've actually measured out how wide each individual unit of this graph is. Because if you kind of look at this animation, it's broken down into 10 pixel units. The space between each one of the elements in this thing, so this blue line right here and this like gray line, is 10 pixels. So the space between everything is 10 pixels. And all of the different elements are just composed of 10 pixel wide segments. So the smallest one that you see right here where my cursor is, this one is essentially a 20 pixel wide section, just two 10 pixel segments together. So based on that assumption, I just assume everything in this animation is based on a 10 pixel unit. So we're going to be using that unit to define how the sizing of everything works on our page. Now with all that out of the way, we can actually start trying to create this design that you can see here. We're going to need an index HTML file. So let's just create that, get some boilerplate going. And inside of here, I want to just link our style sheet. So we're going to come in here and link that style sheet that we already have created. Now inside of the body, let's just first make the body the correct background color. So our body is going to have a background, which is that variable, which is our background. And also I'm going to remove the margin. So margin 0. And let's just come in here and say we're going to put some margin on the top, which is going to be like, I don't know, 50 pixels, for example. I'll do the same thing on the left, just to kind of make it so it's a little bit more centered in our screen. And let's make this padding actually. There we go. So now let's just open this up with live server and kind of see what we're looking at. We should just have, yeah, exactly a blank screen. If we just put some text inside of here, you can see that that text is showing up right here. There's just a little bit of space around it, which is exactly what I want. Now, in order to create this, essentially what I think we need to do is we need to create a container, and this container is going to be the section that these lines fill up, because if we refresh our page, you can see that these all kind of fit inside a square container, and then they move correctly into the location we want them. So I think we want some kind of container. Whoops, make sure I spelled container properly. There we go. And inside that container, I think we're just going to do a bunch of rows. I think that's probably going to be the way that I do it. And these rows are just going to be spaced out with, I'm guessing, probably 10 pixels of space between them. That's about what it looks like. It looks like a pretty square kind of grid. So we're going to have individual rows. And inside those rows, we're going to have like a cell, for example, maybe is what we're going to call it. And these cells are just going to fill up a certain amount of space. I think that is the way that I want to do this. Let me just think. Yeah, that should probably be fine. So we're going to have a cell, and each cell is going to have a size, and the size is going to be anywhere from 1, which would be 10 pixels, all the way up to whatever the largest size is, maybe like 100 pixels wide, which would be like 10 units. So let me just kind of think about this. So let's create our container as a set width. So we'll say container has a width of like 500 pixels for now, and we'll give it a background of red just so we can see that over here. And we just refresh. Did I spell container wrong? Oh, we should probably give it a height. We'll give it a height for now of just 100 pixels just so we can see it. That's still not working. Oh, I need to save this. There we go. So there we go. Now we have that 500 pixel red square. And if I zoom in, yeah, 200% is the same zoom I have on this page. So that way they're going to match with each other. So we can change this to like a 300 pixel width, maybe 400 pixels, and that fills about the right amount of space. Now, obviously, we're not going to give it a height or a background. The height is going to be automatically determined by each one of our rows. So our rows, we're going to give a specific height. In our case, I believe it is that same 10 pixels. So we can just say here, row, and we're going to give it a height, which is our unit. Okay, that looks good. And our container, I'm going to actually make this a display of flex. Yeah, and I'm going to do a flex direction of column, and then I'm going to do a gap of unit. That's going to give us 10 pixels of space between each element. And if we come in here and we just say that we want this to have a display of flex, we essentially want all the same properties, but we want it to be in a row instead of column. So now we essentially have a grid setup, but we're using Flexbox instead of grid because these don't really fit inside a grid. It's more of like a row-based system. That's why we're using Flexbox for both of them. So the final thing we have left is a cell, and the cell is just going to have a height of 100%. And the width here is going to be some calculation where we take a number, for example, like 3, and multiply it by our unit. just like this. And I want this to also be a variable, and we're just going to call it size. And we'll default it to 1. So it's going to be 1 unit wide by default, or maybe let's make it 2 because the smallest element is 2 units wide. So there we go. And then all we need to do is just write out those cells. So we should hopefully be seeing some cells on our screen if I just place down a bunch. Oh, I need to give them a background color. So by default, the background color is going to be our gray color. There we go. So as you can see, we now have 3 cells showing up. They're a little bit hard to see because of the contrast between our gray and our background. Let me just kind of try to make these a little bit lighter and save that. There we go. That might be a little bit easier to see for YouTube purposes. It's going to be slightly different than this, but I know YouTube messes with color sometimes, so hopefully that's easier to see. Now let's give these a border radius. And if we put this at 50%, it's going to look wrong. As you can see, it makes an oval. Instead, we just want to make it a large number, like 1,000 pixels. And now it's going to be perfectly rounded in a pill shape, which looks just like the pill shapes over here. And hopefully these are the right size. These should be 20 pixels wide. Let me just inspect them to make sure. If we hover over our cell and we look over by the cell, it says 20 by 10. So it is the correct size. It looks a little bit different than the cells over here, so my measurements might have been slightly off. But for now, I think that's going to be fine. It doesn't have to be pixel perfect as long as it kind of gets the same point across. So that's what we're going to use here. And again, my zoom level might be different. If I zoom out or zoom in, it'll look a little bit different. So with all of that out of the way, let's see what else we want to work on next. I probably want to work on just creating a single row at a time. So I'm going to, actually, yeah. So for each one of our rows, we're probably going to manually define a style. Or we could just, I don't think you can use classes with numbers, but let me try real quick. If I just did like .cell.3, yeah, this is automatically throwing an error. Okay, yeah, you can't use numbers, unfortunately, but I could say like size 3, and size 3 is going to have a size of 3 like that. And then if I just came in here and I said size 3, that one should hopefully be 3 wide. There we go. You can see that one is 3 wide instead of 2 wide. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class. And we're just going to have a class for each of our sizes. And you know what? Let's just make this on one line like this, because this class is going to only have one thing in it. So we're going to have a size 3. This one is going to be, whoops, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's just go all the way up to 9 maybe. So 8. This one here is going to be 9. Now let's just go 10 all the way. Why not? So 10 and 10. So now, and let's just put 2 in here just because, even though it's the default, just in case we need it. So now we can essentially create any sizes we want. So I could come in here and I could say like size 10, and that's going to be much larger, as you can see. And that should hopefully be enough for us to start making out what our rows are going to look like. So inside of here, let's kind of try to envision what this row looks like. You can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells. I'm just going to copy this down 2 more times. Our first cell here maybe looks like it's a 5. So let's just put 5 here. This next one is a size of 2. That's just the default. We can just put size 2. This next one here maybe is going to be like a size 8. So let's just come in here with a size 8. This next one looks like another size of 5. It looks like the same size as the first one. And this other one also looks like the same size as the one before, so size 8. And then finally, this last one again looks like another size 5. So we could say size 5. Now, if we save that, you can see we kind of have something that looks similar to what we have over here. Maybe our 8s aren't quite long enough. Maybe these actually should be 10s. So let me change them to 10s and see if that makes a bit of a difference. There we go. It looks pretty good. And another thing we can do is there actually are extensions out there that let you measure things. I don't know if I have one installed right now. I do not have one installed, but there are extensions you can use that are like rulers that'll let you measure different things. Because if I tried to like inspect this to see what size it is, as you can see, it's SVG, so it's like not really showing us. They're doing this with like a dash array. So I'd have to like figure out based on the dash array how wide this is going to be. And I'm not super smart with SVGs and dash arrays. The syntax is really confusing. So just looking at this alone, I wouldn't be able to tell you how large everything is, which is why those ruler extensions are pretty nice. But again, we're just trying to get close. We don't have to get it perfect. So as long as we get it close, that's all that matters. And this looks pretty good for that top row, very similar to the original top row they have. So let's work on our next row real quick. And I'm just going to do a couple rows and then I'm going to try to get in the animation before we get too far into this project. I just want to get like maybe 3 rows done and then we'll start working on the animation. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different items essentially. And an interesting thing is they're all centered. So I want to make sure our row has a justify content center. There we go. That way everything is in the center. So without that, actually, it doesn't really move at all because there's only one item in this row. I think that's what we want, because we want this to be in the full container. So justify content center. It should hopefully put it inside the container. If we just give our container a border of like 2 pixels solid white, okay, we can see that that's what our container looks like. And it looks like this actually fills the full size of our container, which is maybe not quite what we want. We maybe made this a little bit too big, or maybe our container itself is not big enough. So let's just zoom out to 150% and change our container to maybe 600 pixels. There we go. That looks a little bit better. And we can just comment out this white line. That's going to be purely for debugging purposes only. Actually, to fix that, I think what I can do is I can just say, whoops, dot container, hover, back or border, 1 pixel solid white. That way, when I hover over this, I can kind of see the size of my container, which will help me with just debugging it and making sure everything's fitting properly. So with that done, let's move on to our next row here, our second row. And our second row has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's add in a 7th one. So these first 3 cells, this one looks like a size of 5, and then our next one looks like maybe a size of 7. And then the one after that looks like it goes to a size of 6. They're very similar to each other. Now this longer one looks like that size of 10 that we've used before. So I'll just do a 10 here. And this one right here is maybe a 7. Then we have what I would guess is a 3 probably. It's either a 3 or a 4. And then another longer one, maybe like an 8. And there we go. We now have that row laid out. And I want to make this middle one right here blue, this longer one right here. So this one should just have a class of blue added to it. And we can come in here and we can say .cell.blue. And the background is going to be set to blue. If we just copy this, we're going to have a red one, a yellow one, and a purple one. So now if we save, come over here, we now have that blue line showing up. That's pretty good. It's maybe not quite long enough, to be honest. It probably has to be a little bit longer. Yeah, because this blue one's quite long here versus this blue one here, which is not quite as long. Just want to make sure my calculation is correct. Yeah, size times our unit here. Yeah, that's fine. So maybe we're going to just add in a couple more. Like we'll add in a 12, let's say. Let's maybe just go by 2s instead, because that probably makes the most sense. There's probably not going to be any that are 1 apart. So we'll do a 14 here, and we'll do a 16. We'll just go all the way up to 20, actually. So let's put in 18, 18, 20, 20. Now we just need to fix a few of these, because all these odd number ones are no longer going to work. So let's make this one a 6, this one an 8, that one a 6, 8, 4, and let's turn these 5s here into 6s. Let's just see if that looks pretty good. There we go, it looks pretty good, I think. And this is just going to help. We don't have any large numbers or any odd numbers, so it'll make it distinct what these different sizes are. I'll change this one to like 16. There you go, make it quite a bit bigger. That might be too big, might not be, but we're going to, maybe actually let's do 14. Change my mind. Okay, that's going to be the final size we're going to use for that one right there. And as you can see, this is kind of overflowing the size of our container. We change our container here to be maybe 700 pixels. And now it's too big. So let's just change it back to 600 pixels. And let me inspect to see what the actual size of our container is. So our container is currently exactly 600 pixels. So it's actually looking like it fills the exact size of our container currently, which I guess is fine. That seems decent. This is one of the longer rows. So maybe I'll make it a little bit shorter by changing some of these 8s to 6s. And there we go. Now it doesn't quite fill the full container. So let's move on to our third row here. And this is where it's going to get tricky, because we need this section to line up perfectly with this section right here. So we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cells. So we just need one more. And these first few cells are all going to be like size 664, I think. So do 6, 6, 4. Yep, 664. This next one is a 4, and it is red. Then the one after that, this looks pretty lengthy. I would say maybe like a 10, and we'll say yellow. And then we're going to have what I would assume is probably another 6 followed by an 8. Just like that. And let's see if that looks pretty good. As you can see, it looks pretty good, but our sections are not lined up. You can see this blue and this red section are not lined up with each other. That is a problem that we obviously need to fix. We need everything to be perfectly in alignment with each other. So to do that, we just need to increase the size of this left-hand side of our container. First, our yellow, let's make it 12. Maybe, yeah, 12 should be fine. And then what we can do is we can increase the size of this. For like example, we can make this an 8, make this an 8, And there we go. Now you can see that they're perfectly lined up with each other. So we just kind of slightly modified what numbers we're using for different things. And I could have made the left side a little bit shorter because I want this to be pretty perfectly centered. So let's see here on our container to figure out if it's perfectly centered. What I'm going to do, yeah, we'll just do a little container before, and I'm going to say the width of this is going to be 50%. Height 100%. Background red. Position absolute. This is just a real quick debug here. Relative. I didn't actually do anything. Let me see exactly why that is. Oh, I need the content property. Okay. If I can spell it properly, content. There we go. So this is the essentially 50% mark. So I want our section to be over that. Let me just change this to be like or we'll just do opacity 0.5. So I want my blue line, my P, to be perfectly centered inside here. So I actually need to shrink the left side a little bit. So let me just undo some things that I had here back to what we had before. And this one looks pretty well centered. Now I just want to shrink this top one. So let's make this a 6 and that a 4. There we go. I would say that that is perfectly centered right now. So now we have our P perfectly centered on our screen, and we just need to always make sure on the left hand and the right hand side we have essentially similar sized elements. And over here, yeah, this whole line right here is shorter. Interesting. So it looks like I need to make both sides a little bit shorter to make it shorter than the line above it, because the line above it is the same length right now. So I think to do that pretty easily, I could just equally remove the same amount. So I can make this a 4 and this a 4 by removing 2 from each side, and it shouldn't actually move. Yeah, my center section, it just makes that line a little shorter. I could do the same thing. I could turn this into a 6, and let's turn this into like a 2. And now you can see it shrank it again. And you know, the sizing isn't exactly the same as what we have on this Prettier site, but I don't think that actually matters. The important thing is how they actually made these things and how they actually made the animations. That's the important thing to figure out, because this animation is really cool, and figuring out how they did it is going to be the hardest part here. So now with that done, we kind of have the idea behind our rows. I could go through and finish the rest of the rows, but before I do that, I want to make sure that what we've done is actually correct. So I'm going to change this to be a hover as well, just so I can hover over here. Whoops, hover. I can hover over and we can see my perfect center point as well as my outline for my container, just to help with debugging purposes. And now let's get into that animation, like I said. So when the page loads, all these things are kind of offset and they kind of move into place, essentially. So I just want to give them a random offset and then move them into place. I don't know if they all have the same offset or not. Honestly, it looks like they all move about the same amount, so we can give them all kind of the same exact offset. So I'm just going to come, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it at the very bottom. So we're going to say our row here, because that's what we're going to be selecting. And our row is going to have a, let's do a translate, and we can actually use the translate property. If you're curious about this property, I have a full video covering this CSS property. I'll link it in the cards and description for you. But we could say like negative 50 pixels, and that'll move everything 50 pixels to the left. As you can see, our entire thing is shifted 50 pixels to the left. So on our normal rows, we want to shift it one way, while on every other row, we want to shift it the other way. So we can just copy this, and we can say that on the nth child here, I think we can just say 2n, and that's going to be every other row. Let's do 2n, yeah, 2n. And this is going to be positive 50. So now, yeah, every other row is going to be shifted to the right, while okay, we're essentially shifting half our rows to the right by 50, half them to the left by 50. And we want to make sure our container has no overflow. Overflow hidden. That'll just cut off anything that goes over the edge of our screen, which is exactly what we want. And now when our page loads, all we want to do is just play an animation that takes this translate value and puts it back to normal. So we can say animation is going to be equal to, what do we want to call it? We want to call it load row. Yeah, let's do load row like that. And we'll just say it's like 100 millisecond animation. Yeah, 100 milliseconds. And we want it to say forwards. That way it retains the property after the animation is finished. I think that's all we need. So we can just say load, whoops, add keyframes, load row. So then inside of here, we can just say 100% is going to have a translate. And this translate is going to go to 0. So hopefully, there we go. Okay. Let's give it a little bit of a delay, because by default, it looks like there's a long delay. So we'll do like a 500 millisecond delay. And this also probably takes like 250 milliseconds. There we go. And the way that it does it on the website is each row animates one after the other. It goes boom, 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 boom. And they have like a 50 millisecond delay or something between them. And the actual animation is really slow. It's like 500 milliseconds, maybe. Maybe even slower than that. Maybe like a whole second. There we go. That looks pretty close to how it is on the website. So now we just need to stagger the animations by 500 milliseconds for each row. And unfortunately, with normal CSS, I don't believe there's a way to like just say, you know, each child stagger it by a little bit more. So we had to kind of manually code that in, which is a bit of a bummer. I'll do it up here. We could just say like row nth child 1. That'll be like the first child, for example. We don't want to do anything different for the first child, but on the second child, we want our animation, animation delay to be a variable or a calculation where it is 2 times our, we don't even need this. We could just say delay is 2. There we go. Because in our code, just like that, because in our code right here, we could just say calculate our delay times 500 milliseconds. Now each row should have an extra 500 millisecond delay added to it. So for example, if I come here with my third row, put this as 3. That's working mostly, even though this first row should have a delay of 1. And our delay is actually going to be 50 milliseconds each, and we're going to add 500 milliseconds onto the total thing. So plus 500 milliseconds. There we go. That wasn't quite right. Maybe like 100 millisecond delay between each row. There we go. That looks pretty good. So what we've essentially done here is I've said each row has an initial delay of 500 milliseconds, and for every other row after that, add 100 milliseconds. So technically the initial delay is going to be 600 milliseconds because the first row has 100 milliseconds plus 500. Next one is a 700 millisecond delay, and so on. So now each one of our rows is going to be animated in just like that. And I think that's pretty similar to what they did here. As you can see, yeah, I'd say it's pretty similar. Their offset is maybe a little bit more, and maybe each row has its own particular offset. It's hard to say. Yeah, I think each row does have a random offset. So maybe inside of here, I can specify like offset, and the offset for this row will say like 150 pixels. There we go. Let me just copy this down. So this will say 2, this will say 3. This one will be like negative 100 pixels. And we'll just do 200 pixels for this one. And yeah, we don't need this anymore. We don't need that. We don't need that. We can move this animation up into here. Makes the most sense. That didn't quite work. Oh, we need our offset to actually be set. So we can say translate is going to be our variable, which is our offset. There we go. That looks really good. So now we can kind of just work on getting all of our different rows because we have lots of different rows to code out here. So let's come down and we're going to do another row. This row has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells. Add in one more. So we're going to have a cell. Let's see, we're on this one right here. So this cell looks like a 4. And we're going to have like a 8, a 6, maybe this is a 10, 8. And then we have a 8 here, I believe, which is blue. This one is purple, and is going to be like a 6. And we have a 2, which is blue again. And then we have what looks to be 2 10s, maybe? They're 8s or 10s, I can't really tell. Let's see what that looks like. It should be slightly longer than the previous row, and it is, but it should be, yeah, it's close enough, I'd say. I'd maybe remove like 2 from it on each side, so let's do like 8, and this one should be, let's make this one a 6. There we go. That looks good. And here, I just need to kind of add this down a little bit because we're going to have like row 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And inside these offsets, we just want, you know, random offsets. So let's say this one's like 100. This one's going to be negative 200. This one's going to be 50. Negative 150. 100. And let's do negative 50. There we go, looks pretty good. This one should probably be negative though, which means we should just offset all the signages on these just to make them line up a little bit better. So I think they kind of go every other on the main website here. If we refresh this, Yeah, they kind of all go every other. I guess not quite, but it doesn't really matter. This looks good enough. Now let's see, what else do we need? More rows, I would say. This row is a little bit off though. As you can see, it looks like it's one cell or so off. Let's change the size on this to an 8. See if that puts it in the right place. No, it doesn't. Interesting. We have a problem. Like, this is like half off by half a cell, essentially. We just need to move it over by half. Oh, it's because it's too big. It's overflowing the size of our container, I believe, is the problem. So let's shrink these all down a little bit. Make this an 8. Make that an 8. See if that works. Okay, now it is no longer overflowing our container. Why is it off by just a little bit? You know what? I think I know what it is. It's because we have a 10 pixel gap between each thing, but all of our other units are 20 pixels wide because they're like go by 2s instead of by 1. So we need to have a way to do an offset that is less than 10 pixels maybe, or equally, it like equals 10 pixels of space. So I think all I need to do is I need to make one of these like 10 pixels longer, which would mean I need to have sizings for 3, 5, 7, and 9. So let's just do that. 3, 5, 7, 9. So now what I can do is I can, for example, make this 7. And then I can remove one from here by making this a 6. That should hopefully line it up. Oh, whoops, I went the wrong way. I need to add to this, make it a 10. Or, yeah, let's make it a 10, sure. There we go, now they're perfectly lined up with each other. And the reason for this is because I have essentially 2 10 pixel gaps in here. And this one only has one 10 pixel gap, and I had no other way of offsetting by 10 pixels at a time other than by using these odd numbers, so we just added those in. So now we have that lining up perfectly. Let's work on the next row, and the next 2 rows are actually very similar, so the nice thing is we can kind of save some work by doing this one. So this row right here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Add one more row. This one is going to be a 4, and then we're going to make this one an 8. Oh, whoops, I'm looking at the wrong row. This first one would probably be like an 8, and then we have a 4 here. Let's do a 6, a 2, which has no color. This one is going to be like a 6, maybe. This is a 6 that is yellow. Then we're going to have this middle one, which is slightly smaller, so I'm going to give it a 5. And then this other one here is 6 and red. We have a 2. And then finally we have a very long one. I would almost go so far as to say this is like a 20. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, we made that last one a little bit too long. 18 sounds about right. And essentially we just need the numbers on this side to add up to the same as the numbers on this side. These add up to 20. These add up to 20, so it should be centered mostly fine, but still not quite. This should be slightly bigger. So let's make this an 8. This an 8. Let's make that a 6, see if that fixes any issues we have. Okay, it's pushed way too far to the left and it's overflowing our container, so we need to shrink things down. I'm going to make this a 14, a 6, and a 4. Let's see what that looks like. Still pushed way too far to the left and too large. I guess this is our largest row though. So maybe we just need to make our container slightly bigger again. So let's do like 650 pixels. Yeah, that should be good. And if we just remove our margins here, like make it 25 and 25. There we go. Now fits in our container. That looks good. Now we just need to obviously put it in the right place. So we need to have, I think these yellow are too big. This should be 6, 4, 6. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, it's almost lined up. We just need to add some more space on the left. So I'll just make this a 6. See if that pushes it over far enough. There we go, that does push it over far enough. This middle section should be a little bit bigger. We'll make that a 6. And these red and yellow sections should be pushed further. Actually, I guess if I just make this an 8 maybe. Let's see if that lines it up. There we go. And this red is slightly longer than the blue, just like they have, which is exactly what we want. It's starting to make that P shape. You can kind of already see it starting to come together. So now let's copy this row down to make our next row. And like I said, this one's very similar. We just have, we have the same middle shape, but we have different colors. So this is going to be a purple, and this is going to be a yellow. except for we only have two shapes over here, and they're both the exact same size. We'll just say like 10 and 10, for example. And on the right-hand side, we only have one shape. Okay, so this one shape is going to be, I don't know, it's going to have to be really big because it's going to have to be the same size as the ones on the left. Let's see what that looks like. Not quite correct. Make that 8, 8. Whoops. I think I might have gone the wrong way with that. Yeah, we need to make, let's just make this one smaller. We'll do like 14. Okay, not quite. It's off by half. So if I just turn one of these into a 9, that should fix it. There we go. Now they're lined up perfectly. That's looking pretty good. One thing I did notice here is if we look at this row right here, this side extends really far on the left, but not nearly as far on the right. So it's maybe actually not being perfectly centered, and they're doing something else to make the shapes as they are, because ours are perfectly centered in that the longest row on the left is the longest row on the right. Shortest row on the left is going to be the shortest row on the right. Everything is perfectly centered, while the way they're doing it is not quite perfectly centered, which is interesting. Also, I think we need to make everything a little shorter so our P is perfectly centered, because it's currently not perfectly centered, because the perfect center would be in the middle of this gray section right here. So in order to do that, we kind of need to move everything to the left a little bit. One easy-ish way to handle this problem would just be to take all of our rows and offset them by a certain size. So like our final translate would be like -50 pixels. I guess it would be a calculation, which is like -5 times our unit, just so we're making sure we use our unit here. Okay, a little bit too far. -4. -3. This is like a hacky way to do it. Now our P is perfectly centered like it should be, but obviously the rest of everything is not so perfectly centered, which is a little bit unfortunate. So we need to remove 3 units of space from the left side of every single row. So a really easy way for us to do this is I can just take one of these, subtract 3 from it, take one of these, subtract 3, take one of these, subtract 3. Let's subtract 3 from that one, and we'll make that one a 5. We'll make this one a 7. Let's see if that puts us in the right position. Not quite. We need to subtract a little bit more space. I guess that does make sense. We need to subtract more space to keep moving it over. We actually need to subtract 6 units worth of space instead of just 3. So let's put this one down to 6. This one down to 2. This one's going to become a 4. This one, we're just going to get rid of that. That should subtract 3 units worth of space. And we'll make that a 3. Let's see if this works. Oh, we have one more row. This should be a 7. There we go. That's dead centered now. We have a little bit smaller lines, but that's okay. This, I think, looks pretty good. And we can, make the lines look a little bit more accurate later on. The accuracy, again, like I said, though, not super important. I'm really caring more about the actual flow of how the things work. So let's do this next row here, which has the 3 colors. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows. We have 3 more that we need. 2, 3. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we have 2 that are like 8s. So let's do an 8, an 8, and a 3. Then we have a 2, which is red. We have a yellow. This one is going to be like a 4. And then we have like a, I would say 8, which is blue. And on the right-hand side, we have what looks to be a 10, followed by a 2, followed by like a 6. Let's see if my eyeballing was pretty correct. Similar, we just need to move to the left a little bit, which means we need to remove some space from here. Make that a 6. Let's see. Still not quite there. Let's make that a 6. I think we might be 1 off. Yep, we're 1 off, so let's just make this a 2. And now we should have it perfectly lined up. There we go, that looks really good. And again, still dead center. Now when we see here, this blue should be longer. Like this blue section should actually reach to almost here. So what we need to do for that, make this into like a 10, that into a 5. Let's see if that looks a little bit better. There we go, that gives us kind of the space we need. Yeah, if anything, it's slightly longer even, so I'll make this into a 3, and then we just need to push these back up. So we'll turn this into an 8, that into an 8, that into a 3. Hopefully that gives us the space we need. No, not quite. This should be a 2 still. And there we go. And it's a little bit too long. You can see that blue section is a little bit too long. So we're just going to bump this down to an 8. And we're going to bump this up to a 3. That should push us back into the right spot, I think. Nope, not quite. Keep that as a 2. And make that a 7. Let's see if that pushes us where we want it to be. Still not quite. Let's just turn this into a 9. That should fix it. There we go. And that looks like a P still. It's got about that right shape that we want. So next row we can work on. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if this is boring to watch, I'll have timestamps in the description so you can skip past all this row section to see the final product if you want that. I wouldn't blame you if you did that. So we have 3 that are about the same size. We're going to have like a 6, an 8, and a 4. Yeah, 6, 8, 4. And then this is going to be like 4, 4, 3, 3. And it's probably going to be longer than that. Let's do 6, 6, 4. Blue, red, purple. And then on this right-hand side, we have, make sure I counted that right, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we have 2 on the right-hand side. So this would be like a 8 and a 10. Nah, maybe like 14. Let's see. Not gonna lie, that was a pretty good guess. I think if we just make this a 7, that might line up perfectly. And is that about the right position? Yeah, that's about the right position. Okay, that looks really good. Again, our P is starting to form. So below that row, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Copy this down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, on the left-hand side, which one? 1, 2, 3, yeah, this one right here. We have like a 6 followed by a 10, I believe. And then in the middle, we have a 2, which is purple. And a 10, it's probably a 12, yellow. And this one is not purple. And it's probably like, let me think here. This is probably like a 8 or 6. And we have an 8. And we have a 4. Let's just see if that looks good. Almost. We need this one to be slightly shorter. Yeah, let's change this to an 8. There we go, it's lined up. This sizing is pretty good for the yellow. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, almost done. We just have 4 rows left. So this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. The far left one is going to be like 10. Whoops. Then we have like a 2. Just gonna add another row here. 6. Then we have our purple, which is also a 6, I believe. And then we have a section that's like a 10 and a 12. Actually, it's too big. Let's do an 8. Let's just see what that looks like with an 8 and a 12. Okay, it needs to be way longer on the right, so let's do that as a 10. This as an 8. That's still not probably going to push it far enough. Oh, we have our offset on it. We need to add some more rows here. So we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 10, 11, 12, 13, and let's do some crazy offset stuff. 150, 250, negative 250. There we go. Okay, now it's in the right position at least. It still needs to be way shorter on the left and longer on the right. So let's make that a 6, that a 4. Still don't think that's going to be nearly far enough. It really needs to go over pretty far. I think our purple should be bigger. Our purple should be like an 8. Let's make this a 14. Almost there. So I think if we just make this a 3, that'll shrink down just enough that it'll fit perfectly where we want it to be. There we go. And I think, yeah, that purple is about the right size for the stem of our P. Maybe slightly big, but that's okay. I think it's fine as is. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So next row here is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another nice and simple row, which is good. I like the simple ones. So we're going to have, we just have one big one on the left-hand side. So this is going to be like a 14. And then we have 2 in the middle. So we have a blue and we have a yellow. And okay, we can't make this 8. We have to make this an odd number. Otherwise, it won't work because these two need to be the exact same size. So this would need to be a 3 and a 3, and that's going to give us 7 total space. So if we put this back to a 4, that should hopefully fix that side. And then here we can have an 8 and a 12. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so this one at the top is actually not quite fixed. I have it in the wrong spot. I need to make this shorter. Make that back to a 3. Make it this a 5. Just trying to get that lined up where it should be. There we go. And then this should be a 10. Hopefully. Nope. 8. And then these blue and yellow and purple, yeah, they should all line up exactly, which is good. Okay. Moving on to the next section we have here is a red one. So let me just make another row. This one has 1, 2, 3. And then it has a red section in the middle and 2 afterwards. So let's do an 8, a 6, a 4. We know that this has to be 7 and it's red. And then that can be a 12 followed by a 4. It's probably completely off, but we'll give it a shot. Yeah, way off. So let's just shrink these all down. 6, 4, 2, make this a little bit bigger. That'll push it way to the left. Needs to go even further to the left, so let's make that a 10. And a little bit more, make that a 3, and that a 5. There we go, perfectly lined up. Now do we just have the one final last row, which will be nice. So we add in that final row, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're gonna have like a 8, 12, 8, 6. Let's just see. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And now we have that full Prettier animation done. Every time we refresh our page, we're going to get that animation that kind of smoothly comes in and gives us that P logo. Now, if we get rid of our debug styles that we had up here, that means that we can actually hover over it and it's going to not do anything weird, which looks really good. And I really like how this has turned out. Now, there is one more thing we can do. If we come over to this Prettier logo and we just swipe it to the side, you can see that everything moves and then comes back. Like you see, it slides off the screen and it slides back on the screen. Now, to do this one easily, the only way that I can think to do it really easily is actually using JavaScript, because we just need to duplicate each row and have them kind of slide by each other, essentially. Like you need to duplicate each row and then just move them. That's, I think, the easiest way to do this, other than using like some really weird CSS for like before and after elements. But if we just added a class to our no, we'd have to do it to our row, I think. Yeah, so if we had a class that was like row.slide, we could say that it's going to play an animation, and the animation is going to be called slide. And let's just say it takes 500 milliseconds. And is there the delay? They do have that annoying delay stuff going on, which is fine. We can use the same exact delay code. Let me just copy this. There we go. So calculation is the delay times 500 milliseconds, or plus, we don't need to add that delay in there. Okay. And let's just do delay -1. The reason for that is because I want there to be no delay. As soon as we add that slide class, I want it to start sliding. Okay. And then what we can do is we can say dot row. Actually, let's just do the animation at keyframes for slide. 0% is going to be transform. Actually, we just use the translate property. Oh, actually, we don't even need the 0%. We can just say at 100%, the translate should be the size of our container. So let's turn that into a variable here. Container width is 650 pixels. So use that there. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to translate by that amount. And I'm just going to do a calculation of this times our direction, which is going to be another variable. And this variable is just going to determine if it spans to the right or the left. So I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. What we can do is we can say dot row is going to have a Actually, we could just say row nth child 2n has a direction of -1. Otherwise, by default, our direction will be 1. So every other one is going to go the opposite direction, is essentially what this is going to do. So now if actually, I can just add this on our container. Yeah, we can say container.slide.row, just like that. So now if we just add that class to our container, hopefully that'll give us the slide animation. And it should just make everything disappear off the screen. Not quite, not quite. Oh, we probably should put the animation of forwards on here. And actually, let's make it on hover. So instead of just putting the slide class on our container, let's just say that whenever we hover our container, we should do this. I'm going to wait for the animation to finish, and I'm going to hover. That's not exactly what I expected, to be honest, because we should be replacing our animation on our row. So our row has this animation by default, and we should be replacing that animation with this animation. I guess we could use a transition, so I could set our translate here to this value. Oh, what is this? I think our code was just wrong. Let me try this again. There we go. You can see they're all sliding off the edge of the page. So if I wait for it to load in, then I hover over it, you can see it's sliding them all off the edge of the page. But unfortunately, their translate is in the wrong position because it's based on the animation. So what I can do is at 0%, I'll say translate 0. So let's let it animate in, and then when I hover, okay, it's still not quite doing it right. Oh, it's because of the delay. So if we say both here, that'll do backwards and forwards, so it should start at 0. Let's make sure. There we go. You can see it kind of going away, which is what we want, but we also need it to come back in. So we need to duplicate the elements in order to make this work. So that's why I think that's where you need JavaScript in order to duplicate all the elements to make them come back. So let's do a script here. Script.js, do a simple defer here. I'm going to get rid of that hover because I'm going to make it based on a slide class. And then in a JavaScript file, what I can do is I can just say const container equals document dot query selector container. We just want to add an event listener for when we click on it. I mean, they do it on a slide, but we're just going to do it on a click because that will work just fine. Container dot classlist dot add slide. And then I'm trying to think here. We want to essentially remove that slide class. Yeah, we need to remove the slide class after the animation is finished. Because here, I think if you slide it and you try to slide it again, it doesn't do anything until it's done, and then you can do it again. So we need to remove it once the transition finishes. So we can say container.query selector. We want to get all the rows, and I want to get the last child. Actually, we could just do it this way. We could just do get all the rows, and then, so this would be called rows. I want to get the very last row, so we could say rows.at, whoops. Okay, rows.length. Does this have a length property, right? Why does it not have a length? Oh, query selector all, duh. There we go. And now I could say rows.length. We want to get the rows at rows.length -1. This is just going to be the last row. And the last row has an animation on it, and we can just wait for that to finish. So last row.add event listener, animation end. And this is going to play as soon as our animation finishes. So let's see if this works. I'm just going to inspect so we can actually look at our console. Clear it out. If I click on this, it plays the slide animation. And as soon as the last row finishes, you can see it says here. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so yeah. I think that's what we want. Actually, maybe what we want, we'll see in a little bit, but I think this is mostly what we want. Also, what we want to do is we want to duplicate each one of our rows and add them into the page in the exact same position. And we want to make them have essentially the translate that's the duplicate. So what we, gosh, how do we do this? This is a little tricky, not gonna lie. So we could say rows dot for each row dot clone node. This is going to give me an exact duplicate of my row here. And I can say container dot append duplicate. And that is just going to add essentially an entire duplicate of everything to the end of our container. So we click this, we'll have a brand new P that shows up, but we want them to be in the exact same place. So we can say duplicate dot classlist dot append, and we want this to be duplicate. There we go. And for our CSS on duplicates, we can just say dot duplicate position absolute, and it should hopefully just show up in the exact same position where our current row is. So if I click this, not quite. Let's see where they are showing up on our screen, because they should be getting added. We have a bunch of rows. Oh, maybe they're not being added. Classlist.append. Oh, duh. It should be classlist.add. So now when I click, it should create them in the exact same location. So I click. Okay, it's creating them all up here. Not quite what I want. I hate. Okay, I almost need to put it in like its own container. Like, const clone container equals document.create element div. Actually, we just clone the container. We could just say container.clone true, and we don't need to clone each row. There we go. Clone container.classlist.add duplicate. There we go. And then we can just add it to our page. So document.body.append clone container. But I want it to be inside of our container. Yeah, I want it to be inside the container. So I can say container.append clone container. There we go. So we don't need, okay, let me see. Let me see what we've done so far. So we've added this clone container inside. Let's take a look at our code. We should have two containers. Yeah, we have our duplicate container here, and it's stacked perfectly over the top of our other container. Now all we need to do is just offset that container. So what we can do is we can say dot container dot duplicate is also going to have a translate of -100%. Now hopefully it's like 100% outside the other container, and when I do my slide animation, dot container dot slide dot container dot duplicate, I can change my translate to 0. But of course, each row needs to animate in its own way. Let's see. Hopefully that works. Mostly. Yeah, let's just see what happens. Oh, and I need to do a transition. Transition is going to be... Oh, do I need to do a transition? I don't think this is going to quite work like I expect it to. Yeah, I don't want to translate the actual container itself. I want to translate the rows inside the container. So what I could do is I could say container duplicate dot row translate negative, essentially just the container width. Yeah, that should be fine. And then when I'm in the slide, so dot container dot slide, the translate should be 0. Yeah, and I should have this is my delay and duration. So this is what I did here. So transition is going to be 500 milliseconds on the translate property. And it's going to use this as our delay. Something very interesting to happen. I'm like very close to this, but for some reason my brain can't wrap around what's happening. So I think inspecting elements is the best way to go. So here's our duplicate container, and each one of our rows are off the screen. And that's because they're using the slide animation, I believe. So I want to essentially not have the slide animation take effect, I believe. So if I just say animation none. Okay, now what? Now this is our container right here. This container in the middle is our duplicate container. I don't want to have no animation. Only when here do I want to have no animation. Maybe not. So let's refresh. So, okay, they're both kind of moving into place. Weird. Okay, this animation none was definitely not what I wanted. So I don't want this duplicate container to be visible unless it has the slide class. So container duplicate display none. And then here, display, whoops, flex. So only when we're sliding is it visible. And it should slide in, but something, like I said, is just off with where it's positioned. So my container duplicate is in the right position right now. And each one of the rows is off the screen, and they're off the screen because of, oh, this translates being overridden by the animation, isn't it? That is exactly what's happening. So if I get rid of this animation, okay, so I think these rows cannot be part of that animation. So I think if I just say here, row container, I want to get the rows that not dot duplicate. Yeah, the rows that are not directly inside of a duplicate container. And they're the ones that have the slide animation being applied. So now when I click, something will happen. Okay, it just appeared, but it's not actually doing the animation. That kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense. And that's because it's just appearing, so there's no actual animation to occur. Yeah, so I wonder if I just try opacity 0 and opacity 1. This is a little bit of a hack that might work. So refresh this, wait for this to go, click. It's not actually moving anything. Why are the translates not happening on our row? Because we should be translating from being way off the edge of the screen to this exact position over 500 milliseconds. Why is that not happening? So yeah, the row, oh, it's because the selector specificity. This selector is more specific than this one up here. So an easy way to fix that would be to, there's actually really no easy way to fix that. I guess I could just do this and say not slide. I think that'll technically fix the specificity issue. And then I just need to put it below. Now they should have the exact same specificity. They do not. It does not appear so. Let's check my row. Yeah, it's still being overridden. Oh, the other one's not even applying to it. So if we're in the slide, our translate should be 0. If we're not being slid, our translate should be here. That seems correct. I do want this translate 0 to override, I guess. Yeah. Oh, my transition is in the wrong spot. We can put this back up to where it was. I actually had this mostly correct. We can get rid of all this nonsense. We don't need this. Refresh. And hopefully this will do something. It didn't do anything. Oh man, this is the pains of debugging things live. So container, it does have a translate 0. It does have the transition. Maybe I'm just going to do an animation. An animation is probably the way I should have done this to begin with. So we'll get rid of this opacity crap. This should have a display of none. I shouldn't even need the display of none, to be honest. If I refresh, yeah, it's not there. And oh, it is there. Dang it. Oh, it's because it's having the animation of this one being applied. So let's just do not dot duplicate. And then, yeah, this animation should be only applied dot duplicate dot row. There we go. And now when I click, Yeah, perfect. So we don't actually need the opacity stuff or the display none, I don't think. We can get rid of that. And hopefully, it's still moving in. What the heck? Why is it doing this? Because, I mean, let's get rid of the transition. Let's get rid of this translate. We're just going to have this. Yeah, it's still moving itself into essentially the exact same position where it would be. That's so weird. Let me, whoops, not view page source. Let me just inspect and look inside that duplicate to see what's going on. We're in the duplicate and we're in our row. The translate should be the container width, but it's not. Because it should be translated by 650 pixels, which means it should be outside the container. It still has this being applied to it, not duplicate row. Oh, duh. I need it to be like this, I think. There we go. That fixed our problem. Okay. So we can get rid of a lot of this stuff. I just want to have an animation. So when this thing container.duplicate.row, and this should be .container.slide. We have a row here. I want to do an animation. I'm just going to copy our animation code for this slide. I'm maybe calling it duplicate slide. I mean, it should do the exact same thing, but I want it to do essentially the reverse of this. Yeah, actually, we might be able to do that by just saying reverse, because that is literally the reverse, the animation. Okay, that actually looks pretty close, pretty close. Let me click and see exactly what happens. Okay, they're moving in from the same side as they were before, which is not quite what we want. I think that's what's happening at least. Let me slow down the animation by a lot. So let me say like 5 seconds. This will really help me see what's going on. So this one's sliding out to the right. These other ones are sliding here really fast. Duh. I should probably change this to 5 seconds as well. So they're sliding out, and yeah, these ones are sliding in from the side. Okay. I think I'm starting to understand what I want to happen. So I need to reverse the polarity of my direction. So this is going to be, do I have anything for direction on here? No, the direction's inside the animation. So let's just copy this down, copy this whole selector. I want to get nth children of 2n minus 1. That'll reverse the polarity of everything. They slide out to the right. The new ones are still sliding in from the left, not quite what I'm looking for. Oh, had a space there. So it slides out to the right, and it'll slide in from the left. Okay, they're all sliding in from the left, which is not quite what I want. Just had to say 2n minus 1 like this. I know there's a way to do odds. Yeah, they're all sliding in from that side. Direction, oh, duh. And then the 2n needs to have a direction of +1. There we go. And now I think I just need to reduce the delay on this one. So I want it to start earlier. So I could say like minus 150 milliseconds. And if we change this back to 500 milliseconds, actually it's probably like 1 second, let's be honest. That looks pretty good, I'd say. And then when I click on it again, I just want to remove the class if the class is already there. So I could just say toggle maybe. Actually, no. Oh, duh. In here, I just need to remove the slide class. This should hopefully do it. Let me just make sure. So click. Everything slides in once it's done. Okay, it popped back to the load state. Not quite what I wanted. It shouldn't be popping back to load. Why is it popping back to the load state? Probably because that animation's being re-triggered. Ah, dang. That's kind of annoying. This load row animation's being re-triggered when that slide class is removed. So it's going from the slide animation back to the load animation. So one thing I could do is I could say, I could just add a class. Also, I could just add another class here that says like no load. This is really hacky. I would probably not recommend doing this, but what I could do is I could just say dot row that's inside a container with the no load class animation, and it can't be a slide also, not dot slide. I want the animation to be none, and I want the translate to be 0. Hopefully this will fix it. This is super hacky, and if it works, I'll explain exactly why it works. There we go, and we click. Perfect. So the reason this works is, like I mentioned, when I removed the slide animation, we now had the load animation being played. So it was playing the load animation, which translated us from this offset to 0. So what I particularly said is I said, okay, after our first load, when we click on this thing, we're going to add this no load class. And this no load class just removes our animation and forces our translate. So essentially all it's doing is it's just shortcutting this animation and giving us the end result of the animation immediately. So it looks like nothing moves, even though in reality what happens when I remove this slide class, all of the duplicated container stuff, those all get moved off screen back to where they originally were. And the original non-duplicated stuff gets moved back into screen where they normally would have been, and it happens instantaneously, which is why it looks like nothing actually happens, when in reality, all of the rows that you see on here are actually the real ones, while the ones that slide in are duplicates, and right at this point, right there, everything swaps places instantaneously and it looks the same as it did before. I am shocked how well this turned out. It's much better than I could have expected. And if you want to see me try to tackle more live CSS problems like this, they're going to be linked right over here. With that said, thank you very much for watching and have a good day.